group are giving a talk about CCA, that's Community
Choice aggregation.
Community choice aggregation, thank you for that help, which is something that we are also working on, where we will get to do basically consolidated buying of electricity, so everyone who signs up gets a slightly discounted rate. So those are some of the things we've been working on. And one thing that we've been working with the town and the Cornell Cooperative Extension is this emergency preparedness stuff, which, as you all know, we have had issues with flooding and loss of power in the past, so we're really happy to have that talk tonight. Tonight's speakers, I'll introduce Jillian Matthews, is from the Cornell Cooperative Extension. She has an MPA with a specialization in sustainable communities from Binghamton. She worked with the Rhonda Never Sink Stream program, and she's had a lot of experience with New York State Development of Environmental Conservation and NYSERDA, which is New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. We have Tim Cook. You pronounce it Cook? Koch?
Yep.
That can go 3 different ways, right?
Yep.
Koch it is, Tim Koch. He's the stream education lead at the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science from the University of Albany. He attended the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, where he received a Master of Science in Watershed Hydrology and Biochemistry. He develops and delivers science-based education on stream processes to residents and municipal officials in the Ashokan Reservoir watershed. And we have Michael Madison. Michael's here. Michael holds a Bachelor of Arts in Homeland Security and Emergency Management from the University of Arizona. He's a graduate of the National Emergency Management Academy from FEMA. He has 25 years of experience in emergency services. He is the County Emergency Manager. So we have a very nice group of speakers tonight, all experienced. We'll do Q&A at the end. And before I introduce or bring up Jillian, I'm going to bring up our supervisor, Jim Sofranco, who has a couple of words to say. Thank you.
Hi. And welcome everyone, and thanks for coming. I did want to thank Tim from the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program for being here, Jillian from Cornell Cooperative, Mike from County Emergency Management Services. So this grant, this program became available to us to have this presentation, and when the CAC, the Conservation Advisory Council, said to me they would like to pursue this, I was like, you know, in Olive, we're used to having power outages and problems. We got this down, you know. And then that was my initial thought. But after I thought about it for another 10 seconds, I realized, well, you know, you always have to be prepared. And what really made me realize how you cannot be prepared or how challenging it can be to be prepared is when we had the ice storm in 2 years ago, in 2022, in February, a year and a half ago. We went 3 to 4 days without power in this town. And other towns were running around screaming like, oh my God. We took care of each other. We survived that. But yet there were issues, there were problems. And I was able to be sitting in the seat of the supervisor, which meant really 24/7 emergency management. I was on the phone constantly, and I saw the flaws of an extended outage, an extended period. That was 3 to 4 days of no power with sub-zero temperatures at night. We opened shelters, we tried to keep the communication open, and we found one of the things that we're working on in our hazard mitigation plan is we identify a lot of the hazard areas we have in the town, and we say, what are the problems in helping this and mitigating these things? And one of the big things that I've noticed is that we only have one cell tower. And if you remember during that ice storm, if you got up before 9 o'clock and got on that cell tower, you could get through and talk to somebody or get some data. By 9 o'clock, it was tough because it slowed down because so many people were using it, because we didn't have landlines, we had a lot of people home and a lot of people concerned about the situation. I did a lot of texting, I did a lot of work with Mike and the county. They did a wonderful job in that, and Central Hudson. But I did want to point out one thing that we do have, that is not in this presentation, is the town, after that, adopted a first alert system. it's called Civic Ready, and you can sign up for it if you haven't on the town website. You go into the website and you go to information, and you go to disaster emergency preparedness, and you'll see a Civic Ready logo, and you just click on it, and you can sign up and get emergency alerts for different types of problems in the town, and you can also get them by text, by telephone call, by smoke signals, whatever they have there. They have a whole line of things that you can get and notified.
Jim, say that again. Right there.
You go into the town website,
Yep.
you go into information,
Okay.
and under that, you go to disaster emergency preparedness,
Yep.
and you click on the Civic Ready logo, and you can then sign up to receive these alerts. And I'm gonna tell you, just so you're prepared, that the alerts are for dire emergencies, like that ice storm. We're not gonna tell you when the power's gonna be out. Central Hudson has their own app for that and their own website. But we are gonna tell you that if the power is out for more than a day, we decide that it's cold outside or too hot outside and we need a shelter for people, we will provide information where that shelter is, where there might be dry ice for you to be able to keep your things in your refrigerator, and where there's potable water for you to get. So we're down to the basics of that, and that's what our cause is. We're not gonna be giving you a road closure for an hour or two if a tree comes down. But if it's closed for more than a day and it's a situation, that's where we'll notify you. So I did wanna make people aware of that, and I did wanna thank everyone for putting this together, because in reality, it is really an issue that we should keep in the back of our minds and have all those things ready for us when we need them. At that, I'll let these guys get on with it. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Jillian Matthews. I'm a natural resource educator for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Ulster County. I'm going to briefly talk about climate change and natural disasters, and then I'll hand it over to Tim, and he's going to talk about flooding, riverine flooding, and then Mike Madison's going to give us a fantastic presentation on how you can stay prepared for the natural disasters we're talking about. So what is climate change? I'm going to keep it brief, but climate change refers to long-term changes in the temperature and weather patterns on Earth. And so although Earth's climate has changed throughout its history, this current warming is happening at a rate that hasn't been seen in the past 10,000 years. It's primarily caused by human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, which release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And so these greenhouse gases include methane and carbon dioxide, which end up getting trapped in the Earth's atmosphere, which leads to a gradual increase in the global temperature. So climate change has far-reaching effects, as you all I'm sure know, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But it's also important to note that it impacts ecosystems, biodiversity, and most importantly, human livelihoods, with potential consequences related to agriculture, water resources, and public health. I think oftentimes people in the Northeast don't think that climate change affects them because there's not wildfires happening 24/7, but it definitely does have an impact on New York State, and it's something to think about and keep in the back of your mind. Here's a few ways that climate change does affect New York State, but there's rising temperatures. New York has experienced a significant increase in average temperatures over the past century. According to the Department of Environmental Conservation, the average temperature has risen about 3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1970. We're seeing increased precipitation. So the Northeast region has seen a notable increase in annual precipitation with a rise of about 10% since 1895. And these intense rainfall events have become more frequent, which leads to more frequent flooding as well. We're also seeing extreme weather events, and we're going to talk about those today after this. But these include intense storms, heat waves, heavy precipitation, droughts, and the frequency and severity of these all have the potential to cause significant damage to infrastructure, property, and ecosystems. And then finally, impacts on agriculture, although not as relevant to the town of Olive. As a state, it is relevant. Climate change poses a lot of challenges to the agricultural sector, and these changes in temperature and precipitation patterns affect crop yields, and they also increase the risk of pests and diseases. Cornell research reported a 20% reduction in the US grain yields due to climate change. That is the equivalent of 7 years of productivity. And losses like that could double by 2050. So just keep in mind, these are just a few statistics that I've given you, but please do further research. It is important to know about these things as you move forward. And we'll get a little bit into these weather events. So heat waves is a big one. I'm sure we've all experienced at least one. Climate change exacerbates the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves, which leads to increased heat-related illnesses and fatalities among people, especially in vulnerable populations, which include elderly, children, and those with pre-existing health conditions. It causes poor air quality and air pollution as well, and it also is straining our energy systems. Wildfires is another big one. Although it's not as common in New York, we all just experienced the aftermath of wildfires, and now it's on our minds, so keep it there. The frequency and severity, you'll see the pattern, frequency and severity increase with climate change. There's detrimental impacts on people, which includes the loss of lives, displacement, property damage, adverse health effects from smoke inhalation, but also long-term psychological distress. We're also seeing an increase in hurricanes, and these have significant impacts on people, but mostly this is occurring due to climate change with warmer ocean temperatures. And so we're seeing loss of life with this as well, displacement, destruction of infrastructure, economic losses, and prolonged periods of recovery and rebuilding. Drought is a big one as well, always to keep in mind. More serious drought conditions have significant consequences for people, including water scarcity, obviously, agricultural losses, increased risks of wildfires, and economic impacts on industries that are dependent on water resources. Next up is winter storms. I think we've all been through a horrible winter storm, as we discussed. Especially in the Catskills, we're known for a lot of the winter sports, so it's easy to think that this is not as important. We want to see more snow, but that's not always the case. When you have increased severity of winter storms, you're seeing more snowfall, freezing rain, and ice storms, which impacts transportation, property damage from heavy snowfall and ice accumulation. We have increased risks of power outages and obviously safety hazards due to changing snow and ice patterns. And then I'll leave it off on flooding. Altered precipitation patterns may lead to changes in the timing, duration, and intensity of rainfall. And so, as we all know, property damage is a big one that comes with increased flooding, displacement, infrastructure disruption, and health risks from contaminated water, and psychological distress. And so I'm going to hand it over to Tim now to talk a little bit more about flooding.
Thanks, Jillian. Yeah, again, my name is Tim Koch. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension, but the majority of my time is spent with the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program. So working up in the Ashokan Reservoir watershed, including a lot of the town of Olive. So some familiar faces. Nice to see everybody again. I'm really glad to be here. Very quickly, I'm an Eagle Scout, a volunteer firefighter, so the preparedness side of this is, really hits home to me. But then I'm also a huge stream nerd, and I love everything about streams. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about flooding, and particularly riverine flooding in Ulster County and the town of Olive. Over the long term, this is the most common and the most costly natural disaster. So I thought it might be beneficial to just dive in a little deeper into the science, and hopefully you can all nerd out with me. So what I want to talk about, and I'm going to move back here so that I can see what everybody else is seeing to make sure. I know you can't read any of the text here, but this is a graph with a couple different things going on. Oh, that's the wrong button. Where is my pointer? All right, so if you can see my pointer, the y-axis on the left here, this is stream discharge. So cubic feet per second, how much water is flowing in the stream at a particular time. On the bottom, on the x-axis, is time. This goes all the way back to 1931, all the way to 2022. And this is the blue line that you see is the mean daily discharge. So every 15 minutes, the flow, the discharge is recorded at the Coldbrook gauge. So this is the USGS stream gauge just upstream of the Ashokan Reservoir. But you can kind of extrapolate this to the rest of the county as we talk about flooding in these kind of same patterns. But anyways, every 15 minutes, flow is recorded at this gauge. Over a 24-hour period, all of those readings are averaged, and that's your mean daily discharge for a day. So that's what we see on, these are the blue lines here. The red dots are the 10 largest floods ever recorded over that nearly 100-year period. For a little bit of reference, stream gauging in the United States didn't start till 1890 out west. So 1930, this is one of the earlier gauges. And this length of record is really unique. There are not that many gauges in the country that have this much data. So it's really cool. You can do some neat stuff with this. So anyways, the 10 highest floods, these little red dots. Prior to 2020, when I first started the program, this graph looked a lot different because this dot here is the December 25th, 2020 flood, which took the number 10 spot. Prior to that, the number 10 spot was over here, I think back in the 30s. And when you think about climate change and the increasing intensity of storms that Jillian was talking about, when I ran a best fit line, like a trend line through those points, there was this clear upward slope, ominous, flooding's getting worse. But anyways, once you put this number 10 in here, it really straightened out that best fit line. And I just mention that because, statistics can be worked in certain ways to prove your point. When I saw this, I then said, oh, maybe if I go back to the top 15 floods, I'll get that same impactful line. And it happened a little bit, but that wasn't the point. We're not here to do any doom and gloom. I'm just showing you data. So with this new 2020 storm, not impressive. But so there's some other cool things that you can see in this graph. And I know you can't read, but this is the 10,000 CFS line for your mean daily discharge here, this purple line. When we start looking at that instead of the peak floods, we start to see a different story. And what we see is that there are these periods that last anywhere from about 8 to 12 years where the mean daily discharge of that gauge never gets above 10,000 CFS. And we've seen this in the 30s.
CFS?
Cubic feet per second, I'm sorry, that discharge range, yep. Thank you, please interrupt me if I use any jargon. So anyways, and it's not exact, but it's 8, 10, 12 years, meaning in the intervening times, we have these periods where mean daily discharge is often above that 10,000 CFS. And then if you zoom up into these, dang it, this is a small thing. Notice all the floods are in these sort of intervening, what I'm calling hydrologically active periods. If you notice, the biggest flood was 2011. Biggest flood of record at this gauge, Tropical Storm Irene, for everyone that was here. And then now we have number 10 down here that kind of bookended this especially dry period between 2011 and 2021. So, the point being, if historic trends can be assumed to continue, we may be entering one of these, naturally, hydrologically, geomorphologically active periods. And so, this is a great time to be doing disaster preparedness, saying, hey, if we're going to be out of power for a couple days, let's make sure we have a kit. And so the end of my spiel on this, I have one more thing to spiel on, but it's, what do we see? So even regardless of climate change, we might expect to see some flooding coming up. But if we are going to have intense storms, maybe we go, another step or two as we work on our preparedness. Now, what does that mean for streams? There's a component that isn't being talked about a lot, and it's how are streams themselves, stream channels, going to react to this? Streams are self-formed and self-maintained. If people, streams were here well before people were doing their thing, being sized based on the watershed. So if the climate's changing, how is that going to impact streams? So if we start out with this kind of conceptual model of a stream, here's the stream channel, we've got little floodplains on both sides, and then you go up into your uplands here. through the study of rivers, going back thousands of years through the sediment record, we have an idea of what's going to happen as the climate gets wetter. The first thing is that the stream starts to get more power as there's more water coming into it, so it erodes the stream bed. And we call that process incision. So basically the stream bed starts to lower. The next step, because it's lost contact with its floodplain, which is this really important part of a river, it no longer has that floodplain to dissipate energy, so it just starts eroding both banks like crazy. That's when you start seeing trees fall in as it gets wider. So it starts widening and that deepening process continues. Eventually, the deepening stops because it gets so wide that at some point the stream loses all of its power to erode because it's so wide. At that point, it continues to widen a little bit, but it actually starts to build back up into this eventual theoretical concept of another stable river based on the new climate scenario. Very conceptual, but what I'm saying is that in addition to inundation and flood waters, erosion is going to be a concern as well, especially for any folks that may or may not live streamside, close to streamside. In response to a warmer and wetter climate, streams are going to adjust. This process of channel evolution, which in this scenario could be called channel enlargement. So as we think about flooding and how to respond and prepare for it, I ask you all just to keep in mind that the stream channels are going to be changing too, along with everything else. And that's all I have. So thank you.
Okay, so I'll finish off really quick. No, it's
I thought it was good.
So the reason we're talking about all of this today is because we've been working with the town of Olive on preparing some disaster preparedness information and resources so that residents have access to it in time of need. And so this is through the Climate Smart Communities program, which is through the Department of Environmental Conservation. We're working on informing and inspiring the public about climate change education, and we're also trying to get outreach out there. So we've been working on a disaster preparedness and recovery webpage that will be located on the town website. So there's already a page there, but it's going to be updated soon once we, move through the process of getting approval and making sure that everything is up to date and correct. And so once that is up, we'll be reaching out to town residents, probably sending out a postcard, which we've designed, and just trying to get it out there as much as possible so that you have information on, there's a ton of information, these are just a few things. The community notification system, so that's local, county, and state, and federal ones, and stream information, emergency shelters, food pantry locations, food and water safety. There's information from Central Hudson. It goes on for a long time. And so that will be available in the coming months. And it will also be a social media series that follows it. You can share it on Facebook with your friends. They're specific to natural disaster types. It's really just a way to direct people to the website. And then we're also, these are the print resources that I talked about really quick. So we're trying to design a rack card that can be placed at locations throughout the town. Town hall, probably local fire departments, the library. And you can grab it and go, put it on your fridge, and you have that information with you in the event of an emergency. And then we also have this postcard that hopefully will be sent out to town residents so you know where the webpage is and how to find it. And so that's my contact information and Tim's. And so please feel free to reach out to us with any questions related to what we presented about, but anything else that's in the natural resources sector or for streams. And yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Mike now.
As I talk to you. See if I have as much trouble as Tim did with this clicker here. Be ready and prepare together. Again, I'm Mike Madison. I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Services, and I oversee the Division of Emergency Management for the county, which makes me the County Emergency Manager. Why prepare in Ulster County? So this little chart right here is from 2021. It talks about our risk assessment. This is done with the state and the county stakeholders, emergency services, folks of that nature. Our number one hazard, flooding. So See the photo behind me? That just proves it right there. Second hazard is wildfire, and we started to see a lot of those, like we mentioned, the Canadian fire and the air quality coming down here, but also we have our own fires in the county itself. The largest one recently was Mackinac last year. That was about a week long to extinguish that fire. And then cyber attack, and then hazmat release in transit, so that's on the railroad or the thruway or any major roadway there is. Being prepared takes 3 simple steps. Develop a family emergency plan, which is probably the most important one. Stock up on your emergency supplies, and then be aware before, during, and after a disaster or event happens. And that's why we're here today, to talk about how to prepare yourself before the disaster happens. Supervisor talked about some things that will be going out during a disaster, and then after a disaster happens, we end up putting together different workshops or groups to assist you in recovering from that disaster. So why do we plan? Heidi, you can't answer.
We want to get out.
You want to get out? Okay. Anybody else? This is your pop quiz.
Makes you feel in control.
Makes you feel in control. Disasters can strike quickly and without warning. As we've seen, we mentioned the Landon, the ice storm that we had last February. Nobody was expecting that to happen, not even national weather. All of a sudden, we all wake up, and here it is, all this ice, and then power outages and all that. You'll be more confident and comfortable in the event of a disaster if you know that you're prepared. You know, when we have that rain event or that flooding event, you're prepared, you're going to be safe, your family and friends are going to be safe. So that everyone in your family will know what to do. You may be separated from one another. You know, if there's a flooding event and your loved one's at work in Kingston, they can't get to you, you may be separated. So everybody in the family needs to know what to do. Emergency personnel may be overwhelmed. Seen that during Landon. You know, certain municipalities were shut off to the rest of the county for a few days until we could get the power lines picked up and the trees cut and things of that nature. So then that brings us to you may be on your own for a minimum of 3 days. We'll get to you as soon as possible, as fast as we can, but always prepare for a minimum of 3 days to be on your own. So what are some reasons we don't plan?
Denial.
Busy.
Denial.
Denial. Big one. Procrastination. It'll never happen to me attitude. Unaware of the hazards and how to prepare for them. So that chart I showed you, that's the hazards of the county. So now you guys cannot use that excuse ever. Fear. You may be scared that's going to happen to you, so you don't want to talk about it. That denial. You may be overwhelmed by the thought of that and the cost involved. You know, Tim mentioned that he was an Eagle Scout. I was also in scouting, and we know the price of camping gear and survival gear and all that. So the cost itself can add up pretty quick. How to develop a family plan. You're going to meet with your family, discuss the needs and the plan, and be prepared. You're going to discuss the types of hazards with your family and what most likely will happen in your area. And then you're also going to pick 2 places to meet, one just outside the home and one outside the neighborhood. Why 2 places? Why do we want one outside the home?
In case anything happens to them.
If it's an event at your house only, fire, something of that nature, why outside the neighborhood?
In case the roads are blocked.
In case the roads are blocked, in case the disaster was that bad that you had to meet somewhere outside the neighborhood so your family, friends will know. And little caveat, if I say family, I mean family, friends, and neighbors. We encompass everybody together, whole community. How to develop a plan, develop emergency communication plans. We have these little Z cards, or we have the big booklets. This is a great communication plan. Uh-oh. I seen it move.
Nope, you're good.
So important information, important phone numbers, family, friends, doctors, insurance numbers, things of that nature. Ask an out-of-town relative or friend to be your point of contact. Why do you want that? That's a big one.
You may be the only person reachable.
Maybe the only person reachable that you can contact because everything else is down, your family, your friends around here, you may be separated. My point of contact is my sister in Albany. So your chances are something's happening down here, it's not happening in Albany, so something happens here, I call my sister, hey, I'm okay, if anybody calls you looking for me, I'm okay. I'm stuck in the EOC, I'm working. Or something of that nature. So you make sure that you have a friend, family member, relative that's outside of the area, and everybody knows that's your point of contact, so they can contact you. Discuss what to do if authorities ask you to evacuate. We've seen this during Landon. We sent out police officers to different houses, different areas that were hit hard, knocking on the doors, checking on folks. So make sure you have a plan on what's going to happen if you have to evacuate. If they tell you, hey, it's time to go because we've been out of power and it's below zero, make sure, they can't make you go, but it's a recommendation to have that plan in place. Be familiar with your escape routes. You should have at least 2 ways out. That's 2 ways out of your home, your work, 2 ways out of your municipality or your town for the same reason. Roads are impassable. You may have to go another way. Plan how to take care of your pets. It's a big thing. We've seen a lot of people become fatalities because they did not want to leave their homes. They'd rather stay home with their furry family members, 4-legged family members, or the birds or snakes. I've seen it all. SUNY Newport, we had to evacuate Newport for an incident with the fuel in the water system, and we had snakes and hamsters and all that all living in one room together because people were just leaving them behind to evacuate. So make sure you plan for your pets. The county does have a program. It's called UCART. It's the Ulster County Animal Rescue Team. So in the event that there's shelters set up, UCART team will also be deployed to sit at that shelter and assist you with your furry friend, your furry family member. They have crates, things of that nature, food, water. So you can still be sheltered with your pet. And American Red Cross has just passed all new policies on that, and we're rolling it out. So, and then make sure you know what your insurance is: your fire insurance, your flood insurance, car insurance, life insurance, medical insurance, all that. Make sure you have all that documentation. Practice and maintain your plan. Review your plan every 6 months. Conduct fire and emergency evacuation drills from your home. Sounds silly, but it will save your life. Test and recharge your fire extinguisher yearly. Test your smoke alarms monthly. So now if your smoke alarm's older than 10 years, you have to replace the entire thing. Even though if it's a battery operated one, you can pull out the batteries, put new batteries in, replace the whole thing if it's 10 years old. And then replace stored water or food every 6 months or at least annually. Usually go by the expiration date because nobody wants to eat a can of pork and beans that's been sitting there for 4 years. So, I mean, I'm a different kind of animal. Know your neighbors. We need to assist each other. So know whoever your neighbor is, how far away they are from you, what maybe their health conditions are, their mobility issues, things of that nature. Because in the event of a disaster, you may have to go over there to assist them and get them out and get them to safety, if you so choose. And that last one, like the supervisor said, people caring for each other. You guys survived Landon because you took care of each other, took care of your community. So we'll get into what everybody really came here for, the free swag. Your go bags, bug out bags, preparedness kits, whatever you want to call them. So everybody should have one, or if you don't, you can grab one on the way out. We have them right there. Be prepared to make it on your own for at least 3 days or possibly longer. I don't expect you to have 3 days worth of stuff inside these bags. This is just in case you have to evacuate quickly, get out of your home. You can leave it in your vehicle or right by your door. But in your home, somewhere in your house, you have at least a tote that has 3 days or more worth of preparedness supplies. Identify and collect important supplies as soon as possible. Waiting until an event occurs can be too late. Doesn't mean after this, run to the local convenience store, grab all the bottled water you can, because everybody else is going to do that when the storm actually hits. But as you go to the store and you go grocery shopping, grab a case of water and put that into your stockpile. Grab a couple canned goods, put that into your stockpile, and slowly build onto your cache of food and preparedness gear. Grab a couple extra sets of batteries when they're on sale, or a flashlight, or something of that nature. So you don't have to spend all that money at one time. Prepare a smaller go kit for use if rapid evacuation is necessary, and that's what the primary for these bags are, is a quick grab and go kit. Most important